Okay, Short Issues Podcast. We are here on a Friday morning, on the Eastern Shore. I don't know where you are, but we are with a gubernatorial candidate once again, John King. How are you, sir?
Doing well. Glad to join you.
Okay, I see you have one of my favorite books right there in your background, Frederick Douglass, Prophet of Freedom.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, you know he's from my hometown, which is St. Michael's, which is where I am. Is Frederick Douglass a spiritual like leader to you or like a inspiration to you in some way?
Absolutely. A great example of someone who fought to make the country more true to the principles of democracy and equality.
Okay, great. That definitely is going to give you some Eastern Shore points for having the Frederick Douglass book right in your immediate background. Okay, so yeah, maybe we should introduce give us your background for people who don't know anything about you, where you are, where you're from, any of that. Could you give us your background, please?
Sure, sure. So I live in Silver Spring, Maryland. My kids have gone to Montgomery County Public Schools. I spent my life really in education, got into education because of the role schools played in my life when I was a kid. When I was growing up, both my parents were educators. My mom was a teacher and school counselor. My dad was a teacher and administrator, but they both passed away when I was little. My mom when I was 8, and my dad when I was 12. And in the period when it was just my dad and me, my dad was struggling with Alzheimer's. So home was incredibly difficult, unstable, scary. I didn't know what my father would be like from one night to the next. And the thing that saved me was school. School was the one place in my life that was stable and consistent. And that's really driven my whole career. It led me to become a teacher. I was a high school social studies teacher. I was a middle school principal, led schools at the local level and state level before coming to work for President Obama, first as Deputy Secretary of Education and then as United States Secretary of Education. Obviously, huge responsibility, a budget $15 billion bigger than the budget of the state of Maryland. And at the end of the administration, I took over an education civil rights organization called the Education Trust, where we work on equity issues for low income students and students of color.
Okay, yeah. So how many years were you working for Obama?
Yeah, so I came midway through the second term. So I came in 2015 to join the Obama administration.
So how, was it 2015 to 20?
So 2017 till the end, I was there at the end of the
Okay,
administration.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I forgot the name of the person that you ended up. Was it Arnie?
Arnie Duncan, exactly, was my predecessor.
Okay, yeah. So what kind of programs did you work on while you were Obama's education secretary?
Yeah, three of them, the sort of things I think a lot about and most proud of. One, we worked on uh, passing and beginning to implement the Every Student Succeeds Act, which is the reauthorization of the Elementary and Secondary Education Act of 1965. It's the main federal role in K-12 education. It's really a civil rights law. That was challenging to pass with a then Republican Congress, but we were able to get it done in a bipartisan way. I worked on that first when I was deputy and then as secretary, and we began implementing. And one of the key elements of that law was really trying to broaden the definition of educational excellence. So, not just thinking about equality education in terms of English and math and high school graduation, but thinking about the role of science and social studies and the arts, thinking about kids' socio-emotional well-being. So that was an important step forward. Another project that I worked on that I'm very proud of, we launched something called Second Chance Pell, helping folks who are incarcerated access federal aid to pursue higher education while incarcerated. And in the 90s, Congress had banned access to those Pell Grants. And we created a pilot program to show that actually providing higher education to folks while incarcerated could help them be much more successful when they come home, make it much less likely they'd return to prison. And that project that we launched, Second Chance Pell, grew over the years, and eventually in my role at the Education Trust, the civil rights organization I lead, we used that program to make the case for changing the law. And actually in December 20, the law was finally changed, and now all incarcerated students can access Pell Grants. And then the third thing I'd mention is, we spend a lot of time cracking down on predatory for-profit colleges. So these are colleges that are essentially a scam. They try and recruit students, they promise a lot of things, and then they don't deliver a quality degree.
Mhm.
And in my time as secretary, we launched an enforcement unit to crack down on those schools, and then began canceling the debt for students who had been taken advantage of by those schools.
Okay. So those programs were kind of downstream of No Child Left Behind type legislature, right?
Well, the Every Student Succeeds Act actually replaced No Child Left Behind. So it was trying to
Right.
address some of the flaws in No Child Left Behind.
Right. Like the version 2.0, for example. Is that what it would be the equivalent of?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I'd only hesitate to say 2.0 because there are some big departures, like this idea of broadening to look at social studies and science and the arts and socio-emotional well-being. So, but some of the key civil rights principles that go back to that earliest version of the law in 1965, those were kept in place, focusing resources on schools where there are a lot of students in poverty, making sure that we um, are transparent about where we have equity gaps. Those parts of the law are important to maintain.
Okay. Could you talk about another group you're part of, Strong Future Maryland? What is that about?
Yeah. So, as an educator, you see how all the other systems impact kids and families, from housing to healthcare to criminal justice. So I've always worked on cross-sector initiatives, but when COVID hit and I could see the disproportionate impact COVID was having on low-income communities and communities of color in Maryland, I decided to found a progressive advocacy organization with a mission of making the argument this should be a New Deal moment for the state. That's not good enough in our recovery from COVID to just try to get back to February 2020, but actually we should tackle deeper systemic problems. And that was the vision behind Strong Future Maryland. And we worked on things like protecting folks from eviction, advancing paid family leave, expanding economic opportunity in historically underserved communities.
Okay. So, I get the impression then that you're probably in favor of progressive education policies for Maryland, kind of in this in the
That's right.
same in the same stream of Strong Future Maryland and the work that you did for Obama. Could you talk about what education policies you're in favor of for Maryland?
Yeah. Well, the good news is, the General Assembly did something really important last session. They passed into law the blueprint for Maryland's future, a comprehensive school funding reform. They had to do it over the governor's veto, over Governor
Yep.
Hogan's veto. That law will help us raise teacher pay, expand pre-K, make all of our schools with large numbers of students in poverty community schools with wraparound services like adult education, health clinics in the school, mental health services. It will invest more resources in career and technical education for the students who want to, in high school, prepare for uh, careers. So a lot of good um, policy in that law. It'll be up to the next governor to make sure we follow through and to make sure we actually deliver on the promised investment. I will do that. I also think we should build on top of that. We've got a lot of students who are struggling socio-emotionally after the 2 years of so much disruption to our lives because of COVID and disruptions to schools. So we need to invest more in school counselors and mental health services. I think we should mobilize recent college graduates and retired teachers as a statewide tutoring corps to work with students one-on-one, two-on-one, help them catch up academically, but also build positive mentoring relationships. And I think we ought to invest in universal quality childcare, birth through five. Many other countries have that. We could achieve that in Maryland, and it would help families. It would help them address one of the huge costs that they're facing around childcare. It will also help small businesses who are struggling to keep employees at work because they can't find affordable childcare.
Okay. Um, yeah. By the way, what subjects do you teach?
I taught social studies and civics
Social studies and civics. Okay. What at college level?
at the high school level, and now, so that early in my career, I taught social studies and civics at the high school level, and now I teach education policy at University of Maryland College Park.
Oh, cool, cool. Okay. Yeah, yeah. So about the new blueprint, is this part of the Kerwin program?
Exactly. This was the product of the recommendations of the Kirwan Commission. Those went to the General Assembly and it became the blueprint. They added some pieces that were important to members of the General Assembly. They added some pieces that were important to the civil rights community. I was
Mhm.
very involved in that effort, and that became the blueprint for Maryland's future.
Yeah, yeah. So I've been following this from a little bit from the sidelines, and I know that Hogan has made some sort of slanted attacks on it, like tried to cutting out certain funding. I thought one of the cuts he tried to make was for salary increases. Is that correct?
Well, this year he tried, so he vetoed the bill, and then this year he tried to take out $140 million from the funding that was promised.
Yeah, and it's
Uh,
from the federal government, correct? So he can't actually take out the money the federal government is
No,
allocating.
in this case it was state money. So
Okay.
he was trying to take out some of the state money that was supposed to go to particularly Baltimore and Prince George's County. And the General Assembly really pushed back and he ended up changing that proposal, withdrawing that proposal essentially because he understood that the General Assembly was going to insist on following through on the blueprint.
Right. So it kind of seems that Hogan disagrees with you ideologically that we need more funding for schools. Like, what would be your retort that you would say to people of that opinion?
Yeah. Look, I would say we have some great schools in Maryland. You know, my daughters have had great experiences in Montgomery County schools. But we also have schools that are struggling that need more support. And it's particularly those schools that are serving low income students, English learners, um, our schools that are serving the largest numbers of students of color often are in communities where there are challenges. And so we need more resources to meet those challenges. We need more teachers, we need more counselors, we need more after school programs and summer programs. We don't have enough quality and career and technical education programs. You know, you think about Baltimore. Baltimore has one of the most active ports on the eastern seaboard. And before COVID, no career and technical education programs focus on jobs for folks at the port. You know, that's something we got to fix. We have thousands of open cybersecurity jobs in the DC metro region. Marylanders could be filling all of those jobs, but we need more programs that begin at the high school and that partner with our community colleges.
Right. So you're of the opinion that better public education leads to higher incomes for people, leads to more job opportunities, so on and so forth.
Exactly. And I think the evidence bears that out. You know, if
Hmm.
you look back over the last 50 years, it's when states have really invested in public education and made sure that they're trying to close equity gaps that states have seen huge economic progress. Think about Massachusetts. They really have one of the strongest education systems in the country. And it's a product of the decision they made in the 90s to make a big investment in equitable funding.
Okay, good. I'm glad that we kind of segued into the public education debate. So you worked for Obama post 2008, and in this time period, there was a lot of popping up of charter schools. Not in Maryland for the most, but you know, in Louisiana, I know, for example, had an extremely big charter school overhaul to their education system. Maryland has a little bit of these. Well, before we get into that, do you have like any macro ideology of public versus charter schools, which is better?
Yeah. So, you know, President Obama and I believe in the role of public charters. So these are schools that are public schools, but as charters have more flexibility around their curriculum and program design. And what that's allowed in many parts of the country is really interesting options for families. Public Montessori schools, public art schools, public career and technical education schools, public STEM schools. Now, there are other states where they have a charter law that is very different from Maryland. States like Michigan, where the charter law allows for profit companies, for example, to set up charters. I think that's terrible. I've always been opposed to that. Michigan also has terrible oversight of their charters. So they give people a charter, and then even if the school is doing a terrible job, it gets to stay open. That's the wrong approach. So what President Obama and I supported was public charters that were part of the public system, but that were truly accountable and had to deliver good outcomes for kids. And in that context, we've seen some really interesting innovations in the public system.
Okay. So you're saying the type of charter schools that you're in favor of are more for like specialized type of disciplines?
Yeah, it's schools that are adding something to the public system within the public school context, not the kind of for-profit model that, let's say, Betsy DeVos was in favor of in Michigan.
Hmm.
And the other issue in Maryland is, we have the Boost program, which is a voucher program in Maryland, which I'm against. I don't think we should be sending public dollars to private schools. Um, this is really about how do we improve public education.
Yeah. So this was a few months ago. There's a school, I think it's in Jessup. It's called like the Bethlehem Christian School, something like that. It's a charter school in Maryland, and they receive state grants. Well, the thing that's problematic about them is that they have some sort of discriminatory thing towards LGBT people in their curriculum that's openly saying something to the effect that, like, if you wear dresses, you have to be a girl. If you wear boys, you have to wear jeans, so on and so forth. I don't have this article in front of me, but I remember being really mad about it at the time being because state funding is going towards schools such as this to teach discriminatory things to kids. Like, what's your opinion of that?
Well, so that's part of that Boost program. So that's not a charter. That's a private school that's getting public money through the voucher
Are you familiar
program.
with this with what I'm talking about?
Yes, one of the problems, not this specific school, but I'm familiar with this problem with the Boost program
Okay.
because it allows public money to go to private schools, and some of those private schools are religious schools. I respect the right of parents to choose a religious school for their child. I don't think public money should fund those schools. And that's my problem with the Boost program. And I actually testified in the General Assembly against the Boost program this year, urging them to end the Boost program
Okay, okay. I didn't know this about the Boost program. So this is kind of being done through that channel that these schools get funding.
through this voucher program. Exactly.
Okay, interesting. All right. But okay, but you are against, for example, schools teaching discriminatory things about gender or sex, anything like that. For
Absolutely. Any school that's getting public funding should be required to follow civil rights law and be required to have a safe and supportive environment for all students, including LGBTQ students. And this is one of the problems of the Boost voucher program. It allows money to go to private schools that are able to discriminate, and to me, that's just wrong. Public money should be for public schools.
okay. Um, yeah. So recently, before you, I interviewed a delegate candidate from Wacomico County, who's a Republican, and um, in particular, she has been on the spearhead of banning a book in Wacomico County schools called "Some Boys Aren't Blue." It's a book about a young black man's discovery that he is a gay person when he's in high school, and it's kind of about his first experiences and told from his perspective. But I say that to illustrate that there's actually a national trend of this going on. There's a lot of book banning going on right now, kind of to an alarming degree. Do you agree that the amount of book banning going on is alarming?
It's very alarming. It's horrifying to see these efforts to ban books, to prevent teachers from teaching the truth about our history. Um, and I think it's really important that we have a Democratic nominee for governor who will push back on that. And, that's been a priority for me in my career as an educator to say we've got to have diverse authors, diverse books. We've got to teach the truth about our history. We actually did our first ad, a digital ad, back in the fall on the subject of critical race theory, making the point that critical race theory is a body of legal scholarship. The real issue is, are we going to teach the truth about our history? And in the ad, I talk about my family history. So I live in Silver Spring, as I mentioned. My great grandfather was enslaved in Gaithersburg, Maryland, about 25 miles from where I live. The property where he was enslaved still owned by the family that are direct line descendants of the family that enslaved my family. And the property has been maintained just as it was in the 1860s. same main house that was built in the 1700s, and the cabin that my great grandfather and his family lived in as enslaved people still standing on the property. That's real. That happened. And so many of our challenges today are tied to the history of slavery, of segregation, of redlining. We have to tell that truth to our students. It is also true that my family went in 3 generations from enslaved in that cabin to serving in the cabinet of the first Black president. So there's a story of progress that also needs to be told to our students, but they're strong enough to hear both. And that's the case I think we need to make.
Right. So your ideology is that you think that students should have a balanced diet of a wide variety of different material that they can read and learn from.
Exactly. I mean, that's the purpose of education, right? To help students learn the truth of our history, engage with different perspectives, and grow in their ability to think critically.
Okay, cool. All right, let's move on to let's move on to some environmental protection slash Eastern Shore stuff.
Hmm.
Well, first off, let's just say that I represent the Eastern Shore to a degree. What appeals do you make to people living on the Eastern Shore? What issues do you diagnose that we suffer from, and how can you fix those issues that you diagnose?
Yeah. Well, look, I've spent a lot of time talking with folks on the shore about some of the challenges. A few things I would observe. One is uh, climate change is already having an impact on the Eastern Shore. Um, you can talk to farmers who are already losing farmland to saltwater intrusion. You think about the flooding that we've seen in many parts of the state. So we've got to take aggressive action on climate change, try to move towards net zero as quickly as possible, right? Getting to net zero greenhouse gas emissions. We've also got to begin to do resilience work. We've got to think about, how do we uh, pursue cover crops? How do we pursue regenerative agriculture? How do we pursue making sure there are solar panels on schools so that when there's flooding or loss of power, folks are able to come to a school and get power and charge their cell phone, right? We've got to start thinking about how we're going to navigate the consequences of climate change. We've also got to do work on environmental protection. I worry the Hogan administration has really let the poultry industry dump pollution into the Chesapeake. We've got to change that. We've got to have much stronger enforcement on environmental protection. There's a need for economic development on the shore. Reliable broadband everywhere would help. Investment in Main Street development. I think about what's really been a renaissance in Salisbury under Mayor Day, and the opportunity to attract people to living in the downtown areas of different shore communities if we make sure that there's good retail, there's cultural activities, there's affordable housing. Um, those are efforts that will benefit the entire state. If the economy of the Eastern Shore is strong, that is good for the entire state.
So you're of the opinion that the economy of the Eastern Shore can be made better by investment in green infrastructure projects such as solar. Is that correct?
Absolutely, offshore wind is a huge opportunity for economic development. Um, there also, I think, is an opportunity to have people who work remotely and decide to live in wonderful Eastern Shore communities. There are a lot of people who would love to live in St. Michael's if they had good, reliable internet access and they had the opportunity to live somewhere that's beautiful. They'd be excited to do that. So we should really have a mindset of trying to attract people to living in the Eastern Shore by ensuring that we have reliable internet and by ensuring that there's lots of fun and interesting things to do. One of the things that Mayor Day has done in Salisbury is to bring lots of cultural activities, the arts, music, things that are going to make it desirable for folks to spend time in the city.
Okay. Yeah, so you would be for example, cracking down on the chicken farm pollution a little more harshly, hiring more investors to do those inspections, giving them harsher harbor fines.
Absolutely.
Okay, yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, to me, the health of the Chesapeake is critical to the health of the state. They physical health, the environmental health, and the economic health of the state. And, when Hogan came into office, one of the things he did was he rolled back stronger regulations that the O'Malley administration wanted to put in place for the poultry industry. And then he starved enforcement. So there aren't enough investigators to make sure that we're taking action against folks who are dumping pollutants into the Chesapeake. So we've got to change that.
Okay. Um, have you seen the price of crab meat recently?
Someone was telling me that they saw that was $80 for a pound.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. I saw it was 60, so you might be right that it's 80 now. And Venezuelan crab meat is like 40. Um, what do you diagnose? Why is the crab meat so expensive right now, in your opinion?
Well, we've got a couple things going on. I mean, there's the amount of crabs, and that's tied to sort of the health of the environment.
Hmm.
But then there's also the broader inflation that we're seeing in the economy, where the price of everything is going up because of supply chain breakdowns that are tied to COVID, because of the higher fuel prices. You look at where gas prices are as a result of Ukraine. There are some things we could do at the state level that I think would help address over the long term some of that those cost of living issues. For example, we're hostage now to despots with oil fields because we haven't invested enough in renewable energy. If we had moved more quickly to renewable energy, we wouldn't be so dependent on foreign oil. So it's important for us, for our national security and in protecting folks' economic well-being, that we move to renewable energy.
Hmm.
We need to address, those core costs for people like childcare, like housing. If we had the supply we needed of housing that folks could afford, that would help make people's everyday lives better. Investing in public transportation on the shore, that's going to largely mean buses, but you ought to be able to reliably get public buses to get where you need to go. That will make life more affordable and improve people's quality of life as well.
Okay. Getting back to crab meat. From what I understand about this industry is that there's actually a lot of migrant workers who pick the crabs and such, and there's been a starving over time of this labor source. I think these people are like the H2B seasonal worker type of people, and there's a real shortage of them, which is one of the other kinks in the price of crab meat. So, could you talk about what policies you would be in favor of um, getting these labor kinks out of the system so that crab meat could go down?
Yeah, I mean, look, this is a challenge across industries, including many agricultural um, concerns where they're struggling to get the labor they need. We need comprehensive immigration reform as a country. This was, something that President Obama worked on. I think he would say one of the biggest disappointments of his work with Congress was the inability to get comprehensive immigration reform that would make it easier for people to get visas to come and work, whether it's in industries connected to seafood or industries connected to agriculture, but also create a path to citizenship for the folks who are undocumented, who are here, and then making sure that young people who have really only known the United States have an opportunity to get help going to college and being successful in this country. So we need that comprehensive immigration reform. It's very frustrating that really the Republican Party has become just opposed to any effort to make progress on immigration reform. And I remain hopeful that President Biden is able at some point to persuade Congress to really take this on.
Yeah, no, I was actually just illustrating this to a Republican friend of mine the other day that we have molded Mexico into an economic colony of the United States over time, an economic and a labor colony. And it doesn't matter whether you like that or don't like that, but by screwing with the immigration so much, you're screwing up our economy too. You're not only just hurting hurting Mexicans or migrant workers, but you're actually hurting our own economy, as you can clearly see with the price of crab meat. So, yeah, just bringing that around.
Sorry
Yeah,
to interrupt.
yeah.
Sorry to interrupt here, Brian. Just want to say we have like 5 minutes to
Okay.
wrap.
Um, yeah, yeah. So, talk about privatization real quick. I understand you're against privatization of toll lanes, and maybe you're ideologically against privatization in a general sort of way. Could you talk about
Yeah,
privatization?
yeah, I'm a big believer in the role that the public sector needs to play, and the toll lanes are a good example of where Governor Hogan's philosophy is taking us in the wrong direction. So he has this proposal to use private toll lanes, luxury toll lanes, as part of a public-private partnership to expand 270. And I think this is a bad idea for a few reasons. One is toll lanes make traffic worse, not better. And the evidence on that is very clear. And the main people who benefit from the toll lanes, yes, some wealthy people who are able to skip past their neighbors, but mainly the beneficiary is the toll company. So I think this is the wrong direction. What we ought to be doing is investing much more in public transportation, finishing the Purple Line, building the Red Line in Baltimore, building a Southern Maryland Light Rail project, radically improving bus service, having dedicated bus lanes. To the extent that we need to make improvements to the highway to try to better manage traffic, we should be thinking about things like reversible lanes as a strategy, rather than steering resources to a private toll company. Another example of where this public-private partnership model has gone wrong is the Purple Line. This is the suburban rail line that's being built. It is already now projected to be $4 billion over budget and 4 years behind schedule. And this was another one of these public-private partnership schemes that's really just a euphemism for privatization. So we know we can do a better job in the public sector with these projects.
Okay. Um, so in general, are you kind of like against privatization in that it sort of erodes away public oversight over public services that people need, and puts it into the
Yes,
pockets? Yeah.
yes. I'll give you another example of where that's happened. There's a program called Mobility or Mobility Link that provides transportation services for adults with disabilities who can't access the regular public bus. A few years back, they shifted over that mobility service from a public service to contracting it out. Now, there are 2 3 hour delays for folks. So you have folks who are trapped in their home. They can't get to the doctor. They can't get to work. They can't get to retail because mobility is not reliable, and that's because they contracted it out. Now, at the end of the day, we need, as a society, I think, to ask ourselves, what do we think it's important for the public sector to provide? And then we need to invest in those things so that they're high quality services.
Okay. So before I let you go, if there's anything I didn't want to ask that I didn't ask about that you want to get off your chest, any appeals that you want to make to Eastern Shore people, could you let us know what those are?
So two things. One is I hope people will check out our platform and our detailed policy proposals at johnkingforgovernor.com and get involved in the campaign. And I would say one of the important principles for me, and it's one of the reasons why the Lower Shore Progressive Caucus has endorsed me, it's very important that we have a governor who governs for the whole of the state. And I think over the last few cycles, Democrats, unfortunately, have been too focused just on the highly populated counties and have not paid enough attention to the needs of the Eastern Shore, of Southern Maryland, and of Western Maryland. And I'm committed as governor to make sure that I am spending time in every part of the state, listening to folks. We were the first campaign to do events in every county, and I'm going to continue to do that as governor, making sure that I listen to, engage, and am responsive to communities throughout the state.
Okay, cool. Well, thank you very much for giving me your time and answering my questions. Could you just shout out your website, your Twitter, or whatever, so people can connect with you?
Absolutely. JohnKingForGovernor.com is our website. And follow me on Twitter at John B. King.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Thank you. Thanks so much for the opportunity.
Yep.